Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful that we can be together again this week. This is something that happens every 7 days, week after week, 52 weeks a year, year after year. And yet, for me, it never gets old. One of the things that people sometimes suggest as a reason for not observing the Lord's Supper every week is that maybe it just becomes something that's too normalized for us, and it loses some of its special meaning. But I haven't found that to be the case. I have found it to be something that I desperately need personally, to be restored, to be strengthened, to be reminded of how great the Savior's love for us is. And not only for me personally, but for us as a congregation, to galvanize us, to bind us together, and to remember the one who gave his blood to provide a new covenant between God and humanity. And it's a joy to be here with you this morning. In Matthew chapter 27, and beginning in verse 36, the King James Version says, "And sitting down, they watched him there." And sitting down, they watched him there. I have just three questions that I want to ask of that verse this morning. And that is, who are these who are sitting down and watching him there? What do they see as they sit there and watch Jesus on the cross? And thirdly, what happens to them? What effect does this observation of Jesus' death have on those who witnessed it? The first question is, who are these who sit down and watch Jesus die on the cross? The answer is given us in the context, backing up to verse 27 of Matthew 27. It says, "Then the soldiers," so that's who is sitting down and watching him there. "The soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole battalion before him, and they stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him. And twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on his head, and put a reed in his right hand. And kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, 'Hail, King of the Jews!' And they spit on him, and took the reed and struck him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the robe and put his own clothes on him, and led him away to crucify him. As they went out, they found a man of Cyrene, Simon by name. They compelled this man to carry his cross. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull, they offered him wine to drink mixed with gall, but when he tasted it, he would not drink it. And when they had crucified him, they divided his garments among them by casting lots, and then sitting down, they watched him there." So who are these men? Well, they are the guards, the soldiers who are in charge of executing Jesus, who has been condemned as a criminal to die. These are hard men, easy with killing. Men that, I don't know, I'm sure there are still people who live in the world like this, but men that it's hard for us to really to grapple with. There is literally no telling how many people they had personally put to death. And not at a distance, not minimizing the impact or the significance of killing at a distance, whether by arrow or by rifle or by drone, but to be so up close, so personal, to literally grasp the body of the victim, holding him down, driving the nails into their hands, and then to sit down for the 6 hours that they will observe him slowly, his life ebbing away, is something that I think is hard for us to really even begin to imagine how hardened these men were. Their cruelty is highlighted in the text as they mock him, dressing him up, bowing before him, offering false allegiance to his authority as king, spitting upon him, stripping him, crucifying him, and then gambling for his clothes in the shadow of his cross. Well, what did they see then after having done these things as they sat down to watch him die? Well, there are 7 sayings that Jesus uttered from the cross that I'm confident that they heard each of these sayings. And so let's imagine, if we will, from their perspective, what it was that they saw and what it was that they heard. First, as they settle in to try to be comfortable, because this is going to take a while, crucifixion wasn't meant to be a quick death. So they sit down, making themselves as comfortable as they can, and then they see that Jesus is directing his gaze from the cross directly at them. And they had seen that before, perhaps. And they had heard it all before, the cursing, "You're going to get yours." Maybe the screaming just in agony and pain. Maybe the begging for relief. "Just go ahead and kill me or let me free, please, please." They had heard all of these kinds of reactions, but they had never, I am confident, ever heard these words before as Jesus looked them in the eye and said, "Father, forgive them. They really don't understand what they're doing." I'm sure that even for these hardened men, that had to have at least been a strange experience to have heard it. And then they saw him scan the crowd until his eyes fell upon his mother. And they heard him say, "Woman, behold thy son," referring to John, his beloved disciple, who is standing there beside her. And to him, "Man, behold thy mother." Jesus will no longer be in the position as firstborn son to provide for the needs of his mother, but he wants to see to it that she is well taken care of, and so commits her care to that of his dearest friend. And these men watching this, again, must have been shocked that someone in this extreme situation, who every other victim that they have seen in this situation is only concerned with themselves and with their suffering and with their pain and their anger, is so focused on others and who has such care for those that he loves. He's mindful of her. You know, Simeon the prophet, when Jesus was an infant, presented at the temple, told Mary that a spear would pierce her own soul as well. And in her suffering, Jesus is mindful of her. Thirdly, they see him then turn to hear the plea of the criminal who's dying next to him. Both criminals early on had railed accusations at Jesus, but already one of them, by virtue of the things that he's already seen and heard Jesus do, has had his heart changed. And no longer is he mocking or accusing Jesus, but now he asks Jesus, "Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus doesn't lecture him about all the things that he had done wrong in his life. He doesn't perhaps go into a long spiel trying to correct his theological understanding of the nature of the kingdom that Jesus was going to bring. He just simply says to him, "Today you will be with me in paradise." A word of pardon. They've already heard a word of forgiveness, a word of compassion, and now a word of pardon. And now they hear the fourth. As an inexplicable shadow, darkness in the middle of day settles over the land, they hear Jesus no longer directing his speech toward the people around him, but to his Father in heaven as he says, "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani." An Aramaic expression translated for us, my God, why have you forsaken me? An expression and a mystery so deep that I tremble to even try to explain the significance of it. And then perhaps as the darkness lifts, they hear him say something that was perhaps more familiar to them. He said, I'm thirsty. I'm told that because of the loss of blood and other factors, that crucifixion caused people to have an absolutely insatiable thirst. And so the cry for something to drink would have been familiar to them and perhaps remind them once more that this whatever this is, this person, this being that's dying before them on the cross, that he is actually human. And then they hear him say, it is finished. As if his death was actually the culmination of some long story reaching its climax, reaching its fulfillment. As if his death was actually accomplishing something meaningful. I don't know what, but whatever it is, it's finished. Or perhaps the word tetelestai that it's translated from, being often found on receipts that were given to people after they had made the final payment on a debt, is given to them stated, tetelestai, it is finished. In other words, paid in full. As if his death were actually paying the debt of some others. And finally, they hear him say, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. It's the word of faith, a word of contentment even, a word of trust as now my life is finished and I put all that I have done, all that I have said, all that I have taught, all the things that have made up the sum total of my life, I lay that now, Father, at your hands, and I'm putting it in your hands, and I'm committing my very being to you, and I trust you. Well, how did this then affect the men? That's what they saw. We know who they were and what they've seen, but how does it affect them? In Mark 15:39, we're told that when the centurion, I suppose the one who was in charge of all of this, when the centurion who stood there in front of Jesus saw how he died, he said, truly, this man was the Son of God. A hard man, easy with killing, struck by what he had observed. 7 sayings full of passion and meaning. Words for us to contemplate ourselves as we remember them. Not only that he died, but how he died and why he died. You know, those words of forgiveness in particular mean a lot to me this morning. When feet could no longer carry Jesus on a mission of mercy and his hands could no longer minister to the sick, he fulfilled a prophecy by praying for the guilty. 700 years earlier, the prophet Isaiah had written these words regarding the Messiah. Therefore, I will divide with him a portion with the great. He shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he poured out his soul unto death. He was numbered with the transgressors, and he bore the sins of many and made intercession for the transgressors. Jesus was praying and concerning himself with the transgressors in his words from the cross. But that's not only what Jesus did for them there. It's what he's continuing to do for you here. Hebrews 9:24 and 25 says, because Jesus lives forever, he has a permanent priesthood. Therefore, he is able to save completely those who come to God through him, because he always lives to intercede for them. Not only did Jesus pray for them from the cross, Jesus prays for you today. And we're reminded of his commitment to us and to our eternal salvation by the edible tokens of a blood covenant made with us. It's good for us to be here today. At this time, we'll ask those who are in charge to come forward and serve the supper.